was about at the age of 7 or 8-ish, I'm not completely sure anymore, where my daddy took me to a country and western concert, local small gig, and for whatsoever reason, I can't tell you, little Roland was so fascinated by the sound engineer behind his mixing board that he thought, I want to be a sound engineer when I'm grown up. So all plans for getting an astronaut or getting a firefighter were abandoned, and I changed my plan to get a sound engineer. A little bit forward, whatever, at the age of 11 or 12, I started to build my own little lighting systems with stuff from the electronics store, and rigged it in my room at home and played around with it. I started to rent out self-built lighting and sound systems in the region where I grew up, close to Munich, and it all went from there. The systems I rented out got bigger year by year, and then I also got in contact with smaller local companies. I started to work with them, started to do jobs, and also started to work as a local stagehand here in Munich. So put up whatever 10,000 folding chairs here for a big open air gig and doing things like that. And I was still 100% sure that I want to follow up this career path and do something within the lighting and sound industry. Funny enough, at some point down the road, I found out for myself that sound is not creative enough, or sound is not really my piece of cake. I enjoy doing visual stuff more, so I enjoy doing lighting more, and finished school at the age of 19 here over in Germany with a mediocre exam, but I finished it. It was the only important thing by that time, because I was already, the priorities were rigging lighting and sound systems and going skiing. So that was the two priorities at that age. My plans to build a huge rental company were abandoned as well. I enjoyed more to go out there and work as a lampy and rig some lights, and then a little later on start to program lighting systems. And that was basically in a very short version how I got involved in our lovely industry. And I was always lucky to get together with people who kind of accepted me as their protégés. And that started in the early years when I started to work as a lampy, and then went out on tours here in Germany to begin with. And within those tours there were people like Rainer Matzke, the back in the day big crew chiefs in Germany, where I learned a lot from them, and they taught me a lot. As well as when I started to work in the UK, and long before Woodroffe, I started to work as a lampy or a lighting technician, going out on the road and rig lights and work as a dimmer technician. And there have been people like Nick Barton and other people who've been around and who have listened to and who have learned from. And down the road, if you now go to a little bit more on the programming or on the more creative side, away from the technical side, there have been people over here in Germany. I'm thankful that I had the honor and pleasure to work with people like Günther Jäckle, people like Teddy Götz, Louis Helmig, all good friends and still good friends. And for whoever I worked for, I learned bits and pieces. And I mean, that was always kind of, I think, a good thing that I decided from day one in this industry, open up your eyes. And when you go out there and work with other people, and it doesn't matter if they're in the hierarchy above you or below you, that you can learn from each and every one of them. And there are always two things you could learn from people. There are obviously the craft, what you do to design a show, or how to program a lighting board, or how to rig a light, or how to fix a light. But that is 50%, and the higher you go up in the industry and on your career path, the other 50% are getting more and more important. This is how you behave, that you're a nice guy, that you don't have an ego, and how to also, if you get more into design work and doing business stuff within design work, it's all about a lot of behavior and how to do business. And these are all things I learned from all of them, and partly took away bits and pieces here and there. So as said, it's hard to put it or nail it down to one person. And obviously later on in the career, when I started to work together with Patrick, people like Patrick or Adam or Vince Foster and all those guys, obviously that was another step on the learning curve, because they brought in the international flavor, which is obviously slightly different than the just local flavor. I don't want to judge it, I wouldn't say better or worse, but it's different. And you've got to learn how to work on that market and work within those workflows. So I was then blessed to learn from those people and learn from the ground up again to a certain degree, because there are things which are done completely different in another country to a certain degree. And even if it's not, obviously you can only rig a light one way, but how you load it out and how you load it in, and or how you program it, there are different ways to do it, and there are, to a certain degree, quite special in each market or in each area where you work within, and you've got to learn and adapt to them. Going into the UK market or working with UK people, especially in the touring industry, is your door opener to the world to a certain degree. That opens your door to work more internationally, especially in the concert touring sector. How did I meet Patrick? How did it all start? The very, very first step, I really honestly forgot how we got together, but I got to know Adam Bassett, and nowadays Patrick's business partner, or one of his two business partners. And we met a long time ago, and we didn't work together at the beginning, but we stayed in contact, and we found out that we kind of have the same thoughts and that we like each other. So there was I wouldn't say friendship at that stage, but there was a good connection between the two of us, and that was there for at least 2 or 3 years before we ever did anything together. By that time, Adam was pretty much Patrick's main associate and working as his associate designer on literally all of Patrick's bigger shows, besides of building his own career. But within this very close team of Patrick and Adam back in the day, at some point down the road, Adam was also aware that in the early 2000s and until whatever, around about 2007 or 8-ish, don't remember when I got a little away from it, but we did a lot of visualization and pre-programming work in the beginning. And when we did that, he was aware that I offer visualization services and I did renders and all that stuff. And there was, at one point, there was kind of the need to visualize or to put a render package together for one of Patrick's shows. I think, if I remember it right, it was a show in South America, in Brazil, for a Brazilian client. And so he thought, hey, that could be possibly the chance to finally do some work together, not just chat every month or so. And he connected me to Patrick. That was the very first time I met Patrick. I didn't meet Patrick, but we had a call and we started to do this project together. And after that project, a few weeks later, there was the next visualization project. So we started to do visualization for Patrick and Adam later on as well. This is that was the groundwork of our collaboration or our work connection, and also definitely the groundwork for a very long, by now very long friendship, because I call both of them very, very close friends, beside of good business collaborators or partners, or however you would call it. And a little while later, possibly a year or two later, there was then the need for somebody to program a show for them. I mean, very, very small scale. This is something I had to learn, not the hard way, it's the wrong wording, but what I had to accept as well, because by that time I was already in the industry in Germany and on other projects for roughly nearly 8-9 years. So I was not the rookie anymore, and I had a little bit of experience in program shows, and I thought, obviously, as you always do when you're younger and you at age, you often tend to think you're the king of the world and you know everything and you're the best and blah-de-blah-de-blah-de. Obviously I was very likely not. When I started to do shows with them, very small scale shows, it was like beginning from scratch again. At least they kind of they wanted to see what I can do and so on and so forth. So it was like building again. So obviously then you need to put away the remainders of your ego which you have in your head and just throw them over the bridge. And we did smaller shows, and the shows grew, the shows got bigger, the relationship got stronger, the trust in between it. All of us got got stronger also. Then it wasn't only programming anymore. I was starting to design with them, working as an associate as well as for them. So they trusted me with complete productions, and I mean that ended, or that came to the fruition a little later in my life, when after a few different other ventures. In 2016, we decided, 2016 or 17, we decided to put our workforce completely together. And basically, for the last 3 years or 4 years, I completely offered my services exclusively through Woodroffe Bassett Design, and we acted very closely together as one company. That opened up due to COVID and other things a little bit, but at the end of the day, we're still collaborating on many projects. We just finished to put together the new Genesis show, Patrick and myself, and there will be many more in the future, hopefully. And it's, as I said, and this is something I think important. Beside of that, they gave me the chance to really venture out from Germany to work on this bigger scale tours and these big productions in many parts of the world. They also taught me a lot how to be as a person, and I really value them as close friends as well. You've got to start somewhere. It doesn't matter if it's video or lighting, first of all, but latest when you get into more design work and creating designs for shows and building shows, you will realize that it's always a visual experience or a visual design. So literally, a good lighting design is nothing without a good set design, and vice versa. For instance, if the set design is shit and the lighting is great, the lighting design will be just average, even though the lighting design is great. So it is super important that you look at it as a holistic design. It doesn't mean that you know every bit and byte. I mean, I was always curious about other stuff. So, for instance, if you look at video stuff, I started to play with media service very, very, very early, I would say, late 90s, early 2000s, and some of the very first versions of Catalyst back then, and we were some of the first users worldwide, even before high-end bought that thing. And so we started to play with the ideas of media service and integrating video into lighting early, and obviously we followed that up and tried to push the technology forward. And by now, I mean, obviously it is a given, and there are many different servers out there and stuff, but it's always about a holistic design, without any doubt. It's absolute key to stay grounded, to avoid to have any ego. And as I think I said it before, I would guess that the higher you get into in this rank, so if you say higher or more successful, however you will call it, there's always, obviously, whatever you do, if you're a lighting designer or lighting programmer or video designer or video programmer or video director, it doesn't matter. Obviously, you need to kind of deliver your work. So your work needs to be well done, and you should deliver that what you offer. To really be successful, especially for a longer period of time, there is also the human factor, and I think it's key to have no ego, because what you've got to remember at all points of time is our work should and will never be about us, or it will never be in the limelight of a show or the climax of the show. It is always just the picture frame around it, and we are just doing that to put somebody else in the limelight and to show somebody else off in a very good way. So, and this is, if you think about that and apply that on you personally, hey, we are just service providers. And even though if you're designing Rammstein or working on a Rolling Stone show or working on a Genesis show, it doesn't matter. It's like there is no reason, because for me personally, it doesn't make a difference if I work on Genesis or if I work on a small local show. You put in the same effort and you treat it the same way. And it's not about being a star or anything. And this is also something you learn when you work with big names within the music world. Like if you talk to these rock stars, the longer they are kind of successful and the longer they're in the game, let's talk about Phil Collins or Stones or Genesis or any one of them, they are grounded. There are people like from the neighborhood, and they want to be treated that way, and you treat them that way, and you get respect by being a gentle and humble being. That will definitely be a good ingredient if you're trying to have a career in this industry, especially on the design side. To put all your ego aside, be a humble, be a nice guy, deliver your work, and act correctly, and will just help, I would say. Before you even think about technology, when you did your research work, you know now what the client expects, what would be the perfect, let's put it that way, would be the perfect atmosphere or the perfect picture frame for this specific artist or this specific show to perform in. When you learned all your things to have that knowledge, then you start to think about, let's say, looks or images. You think about how could this picture frame look. Not even thinking about any lights or any video or any technology, I would say. Then in the next step, then you get a rough idea and then literally kind of a goal where you want to head. Then you either, obviously, with bigger productions, normally by that time you should always have your counterpart, have somebody on your side who looks after the set, and somebody on your side who looks more detailed into video. But generally, if you look at production design, then you've got this rough idea, and then you start to work out to translate your look and feel, your look into reality by using the right tools, by using whatever, this amount of that type of light, or this amount of that LED screen or LED product, or how you shape your stage, or how you shape your set design. But it always starts with an overall idea, and when you then go down the road, even though when you're translating it, obviously it should always be with the bigger picture in the back of your head, to have to look over everything, that everything works together, and it never should work against each other. It always should kind of work together and complete each other instead of fight each other. When we started to work with Rammstein, it was, and this is where you never should be afraid of building teams. It's like, again, it's not about yourself. It's often the bigger the projects they're getting, it's about getting the right team together. And it was quite obvious from the beginning that Rammstein, it's a very theatrical production, and they expected a production design. So they expected everything, how this show will look like. So I brought in my good friends in the form of Florian Rieder and also Patrick. We started to work together on this project in the very early stages, and especially Florian and myself, we started to think about and bounce back and forth ideas. We all did our homework to learn about their history, and especially visually, they had a very strong history, because they've built their own world, they've built their own identity, visual identity, which is very strong and well known all over the world. So the expectations were quite high, and obviously the plan was never to completely revolutionize or do something completely different, because it would have been 100% wrong. So you had to learn first to know all that, the basics and the backgrounds, and from there on we built, and it's like always, it's like if you create something or try to be creative, it is a process you can't really control and you can't really force. There are moments where you think quickly about that, and it could be in the bar having a pint of beer, or sitting on a toilet, or anywhere, and you think about, oh, that could be great, and then you look out and you look for some inspiration, either in architecture or in the nature or wherever. And based on that, there's a back and forth bouncing between the different involved creatives. Rammstein has got a very defined visual world, and which they created over the years. And we looked at all their shows, and I mean, there are kind of elements in there which are there as a constant element, like their logo and the more dirty industrial look, and the steampunk kind of style. And then we thought of how can we kind of translate this look into a stadium setting, because beforehand they always had, I would say in their case, a little bit the luxury of playing indoors, where you've got the big help of darkness, and then outside you don't have this help of darkness. So it was quite clear that whatever we do for them, it has to be unique, it has to be special, and it has to be quite architectural, because it has to be something which works in daylight as well as at nighttime. And then we ventured out about ideas. What can we do? What would really look good, and put the right picture frame around that, within staying within these constraints of a very industrial steampunk style. And while bouncing back and forth, we came up with this idea, something unique, to create this real architectural tower in the middle of the stage, which is like a landmark. Not even just a stage, it is a landmark which is there, and as soon as you see it, you think about that as Rammstein. And then Florian, mostly Florian at that time, started to do his magic to build this tower, design this tower in a way that it again fits into the Rammstein aesthetics and the Rammstein world. And the beauty of having started the whole project, or the whole process of designing together, gave us obviously the perfect chance that we, from the beginning on from the scratch, we were able to implement lighting positions, but lighting positions in a way that it didn't look like a lighting rig, so that it was kind of part of the architecture. And when we formed, while we formed the basic architecture, literally, obviously, it was always the idea or the goal to create something which can transform to a certain degree, because in our opinion, or in my opinion as well as Florian's and Patrick's, key to success for a show is definitely transformation. So you look at it as sometimes it's very helpful to use your experience and knowledge you have from theater productions and transport them into rock and roll, and look at it to a certain degree in a theatrical, scenic way. And a show should always consist of a few different, very different, distinctively different visual acts. And so that was also the goal for Rammstein, and especially for them very important, that you can use the tower. Obviously the tower is a tower, but it should look different over the show. Obviously in daylight it is the tower, there's not too much you can do to change it visually, but as soon as it gets dusk and it gets darker, you can transform it with lighting, and you can transform it with LED strips. And this is where we created these different scenes, like which we even called that way, industrial scene, a Mad Max scene, and then a kind of modern take on it, which I think was a little new flavor we together with the band added to this show, that we kind of emerged a little bit from this industrial steampunk world into a more modern world, where we had the middle part of the show which was very modern, like Tron style, with a lot of LED lines, very defined LED lines. So it's all about, and then you do the detail work, and you're getting more and more in detail. It's like designing a show is always, I use that kind of similarity of painting. You start painting with a very, very rough, big brush and a huge brush stroke. It will be your first brush stroke, and then you start with finer and finer and finer brushes. So you get more and more detailed down the road. Obviously that starts from your first idea, and the final detail you add to a show is obviously when you create the songs then later on. From a technical specification and what we used in this show, and this show is quite a good example for this kind of approach of a show. We thought, in the very first step before we thought about specifying a specific type of light, the key was to think about what kind of look do you want to achieve. Again, down to a specific Rammstein kind of aesthetic, these looks are narrowed to a certain degree. And then you go out in the market and look what is available, what product would be the best product, and also what product can be delivered, because you could end up finding a perfect product which is on a website of a manufacturer, but nobody has bought it and nobody will buy it for this specific show. We spent 5 days in London at Negerf in their pre-programming studio, myself and my trusted programmer Mark Brunkart, and it gave him the chance on a WYSIWYG system to really get his desk layout sorted and all the groups done and all the homework done. But also then we used, I think, 2 or 3 days, 2.5 days of the 5 days to literally work on the songs. But what we did there is literally we just defined one look for each song. Like literally that you don't need to start from scratch when you get on site, that you've got already an idea. Possibly we'll completely redo it on site, that's always a possibility, but we put together one strong look to start from. And then we went into Berlin and we had roughly, I think, around about 3 weeks in Berlin with the whole set, with no band on stage, to really program in detail the show. There, obviously, it is very helpful to have already your stuff pre-programmed to a level where you have a look, because you can play around a lot in Viz to check out, oh, that could work, that couldn't work, check out possible focus positions and so on and so forth. And then we started to take each one of those basic looks we created in London in the studio and kind of detailed the songs out of them and programmed the songs. And on average, I think we did 2 songs or 3 songs per night-ish, and then you do 2 passes on all songs. So you do it once, and then you look at it again and think possibly, oh, that is quite great what you've done, and you just add some more love, or you possibly even come to the point where your programmers hate you, but where you say it's like, bin it and redo it again. But that's the beauty of having enough time. And then ultimately, down the road, obviously we had another 4 or 5 days with the band on stage, which adds another layer to the whole visual experience, because you can have the whole rig and you can have everything, and you can put mannequins on stage. It will never feel the same, or you don't ever have the same energy as you would have with a band on stage. And then you, again, in the last step, during these rehearsals, you kind of craft the songs a little more, and your looks a little more, and you detail them a little more, and you possibly also take stuff out. Often what we tend to do, often you kind of, you make things better by switching stuff off. You take out stuff you originally put in. It's like just cleaning up and getting back to your karma or your mantra of less is more, and that often helps. Very early in the process, you need to make a decision. What does the artist need? How big, how impressive does his picture frame or the atmosphere, the scenery you create, need to be? Rammstein, it's all about them. It's all about the artists on stage, them playing music, but visually it's a big part of their show to have this visual extravaganza. While especially Phil Collins, he's got a huge presence in that show, and it was a big pleasure to work, or a big honor to work together with Patrick on his show over the last few years. Literally, you've got him on stage, he's got a huge presence, and you also got an outstanding, possibly one of the best backing bands in the world. There are some of the finest musicians on stage playing with him. So there's a lot of action going on, and then you've got a brass section running over the stage playing trumpets and saxophones and things like that. So you quickly come to the point, or to the point that you don't need every gag in the world to put around them. It's all about them. Obviously you still need moments in the show where you have the moments where it's big and it's very dynamic, but mostly it's about creating, as you said, this picture frame around it. It comes down to make that judgment what is right for the show, and that brings us to a point where I always say it's like, never use technology for technology's sake. Always use technology for a reason. Every year there are new gadgets out there. There are new servers. There are brighter lights, better lights, quicker winches, bigger stages. There are so many toys. But it's never about using toys. It's always about creating the perfect setting or a perfect design around and for the performance which happens on stage. And it doesn't matter if it's a concert, a theater, a presentation, or whatsoever, or a broadcast show. And you pick and choose the right toys for the right thing. And if you just transfer it to finish that up, you mentioned the use of LED walls and video on Rammstein and on Phil Collins. On Phil Collins, it's a very, very handy toy, and it was a perfect toy to create some versatile and different backgrounds, and it perfectly fits the whole aesthetics there. But for Rammstein, honestly, if it wouldn't have been in a stadium where you have got a duty to a certain degree to transport big IMAX images to the back of the stadium, it wouldn't have hurt to have no video screens at all, because Rammstein is industrial, Rammstein is rock and roll, it's dirty, it's something, it's not digital, it's not by any means digital. And obviously the last 10-15 years, when especially LED walls got nearly for free out there in the market, and they got very, very cheap, everybody tended to create huge sets just out of LED wall. That could be for the right purpose, it could be exactly the right decision. But sometimes, as for Rammstein, the less video wall or LED product you can have, the better it is, because it doesn't fit the look and feel of their aesthetics. It all comes down to that judgment, that you judge it the right way, that you use the right toy or the right tool for the job, and don't use it because you could afford a huge video screen. It's always like what you're aiming for. And if you look at the Stones, Patrick's idea for the last Stones design, no filter, which we toured now for 3 years and would have toured for 4 years if there wouldn't have been a pandemic. It was always, he wanted to create something quite modern, something contemporary, something different, and something which looks, as said, quite modern, and takes the Rolling Stones, an old rock band, into the new age as well, from a visual standpoint. And then we created this 4 columns, or basically mostly Patrick together with Stufish, with Ray from Stufish, created this 4 monolith. And it was, again, there was an idea for a certain look or something you want to achieve, and that was kind of a tool or an element or to achieve that look, to achieve that idea. Same for Adele. It was always, even more than Phil Collins or anybody I've worked with in the last 10-15 years, she had an absolutely amazing stage presence. I mean, that girl, you put her in a stadium, make sure that she's lit with 4 follow spots, and put a good PA system in that everybody could hear her, and that is, you've got a show that works. She will catch the audience, and she will have them in the palm of their hand for 2 hours without any problem. So there is no need at all for big gags, and therefore we wanted again to create something very elegant, something kind of at least optically minimalistic, special thing. And again, S. Devlin back in the day did the set design for that show and had the big idea for that, and I think she did an amazing job achieving that. And we picked that up with lighting, with Adam and Patrick being involved in the show and leading the show. We picked it up in the way that technically there were very minimal lighting cues, because there was no need for many lighting cues, as well as there was very minimal use of color over the show. So it was, I would even say, a stylistic element for this specific show, to have it mostly in pastel or mostly white colors. I always called it the 50 Shades of White to a certain degree. And we just used kind of saturated color in a very, very spared way. So there was very, very low usage of saturated color. But then again, that brings you to another little kind of magic trick creating shows. When you use saturated color, or when you use any stylistic element just once, it will be strong, it will blow the people's minds. While if you show every saturated color of the world within the whole show, it is just boring. It's not boring, but it's nothing special. By now I'm 100% convinced that the new normal will be different. Different in many ways, and also different from that standpoint that a lot of the stuff the industry has learned over the last year or year and a half in this crisis could be used post the pandemic as well, and could be integrated into this the real life entertainment scenario or life entertainment world. And within my buddies, collaborators, companies, we all discussed many ways, and We also guinea pig stuff and we showcase stuff, and we had to use already some parts of the technology to work within the current situations. Things like completely remotely control a production from here, from my home office, or design a production from home while the gig is happening a few hundred kilometers north of here. We put a lot of thought in how you can create an immersive streaming experience for live shows in the future, because that will be an element which will be used to create more benefit and to give more people access to see some shows. Because in the normal hectic world before, the evolution process would have taken way longer, and that gave a lot of clever and smart people some time to really play around with those kind of technologies and use them. And I mean, again, then down the road when we return to a normal, the same thing I would say will apply, as I said already, about designing shows. It's not about using a new technology for this specific technology's sake. It's about using the technology for a reason that it makes sense to use them, and not just because it's there. It is important, especially if you look at all that kind of streamed stuff which has happened, or online stuff that has happened. And I mean, if you stay within the concert touring industry, what Fireplay did or what they developed, or what Claire developed with VLA, this is their virtual live audience system, or even so Peter Brandt from Remote Show Productions had a very similar approach. The background of all of these approaches is like you want to create a little bit of more immersive experience for both ends. Obviously, it gives the artist performing or the speaker having his speech in a corporate show some more feedback from the people if he sees faces there. So you have obviously you don't have the people in real there, but at least you see them, and obviously there could be an audio feedback as well. So there could be cheering people, or there could be people asking a question, or doing things like that. So it's all about putting together those elements and make it a little bit more immersive for both ends. And then on the other hand, if you do it like the Remote Show Productions approach, is like literally they did it with iPads, but there the viewer back home, everybody gets a dedicated iPad in a certain, like you would in a concert or in a theater. You're sitting in the second row there and there, and then they can decide if they just want to see the stream, the directed stream, or they can also say, hey, I want to see the show as I would see the show in the real world, sitting in my chair. So they, instead of looking at the cut, they can say, I want to just look from that camera perspective where my iPad is. It adds something positive to both ends of the cables. The initial idea has nothing to do with Corona at all. I mean, it all started basically after we finished Rammstein, because during our collaboration in Rammstein and putting together and designing together Rammstein, we found out that beside of our private friendship, there is also a lot of common ground within designing shows and our approach to things, and this non-ego approach. And we really enjoyed it, and the result was, I think, quite decently okay what we did with Rammstein. We bounced back and forth some ideas about doing more stuff together in that shape and form. And also we both shared the opinion, as said multiple times today, that it's quite important, or one of the keys to success in our day and age is to always look at design work in a holistic way, to don't look at the set design only, or lighting design only, or video design only. It's always about the whole visual production and the whole visual design. And we both agreed and thought that if this comes from one source or from one studio, it's just beneficial for the quality of the work, as well as for obviously the client at the end of the day as well, because they've got one company they need to go to, and they need to worry about making their show look good or creating what they want to. And so we decided at some point then we want to do something together, and we share so many things, it's time to build something. And then we decided to create a company, and we named the new baby The Black Project, and founded a new company in Los Angeles, a new production design studio. With the two of us having been around this industry in many ways for a long time, there's a big book of contacts and friends around the world from all parts of the industry. So because we know our limitations, and it's important to know your own limitations. But if you want to go further and you do something which is outside of the boundary of your limitations, you just bring in a collaborator or a partner and a friend from who you work with independently or you work with on other projects. And the network, we've got such a great network of diverse people, from lighting designers to video designers to content people to set designers, production designers, art directors, to creative directors. So we could combine a lot of expertise in the industry if needed. So it's a very flexible production design studio, kind of built on two different mindsets. This is because, yes, we are like-minded in many things, but we also different in others, and that's also a great breeding ground to have different opinions and different backgrounds, where Florian's is more broadcast related, mine is more on the live entertainment side, so they complement each other again. I was approached by some friends in the form of Holger Schader and Peter Brand last year, because they had this, not the idea, but they had the technology and they wanted to create a showcase for remote show productions. And obviously we started to talk, and they started to kind of tell me what remote show productions is and what the whole thing means and what the technology behind it is and what they wanted to do. And what they wanted to do is a showcase, literally where you do a gig, a concert, somewhere. Ultimately it was in Bottrop at this rehearsal facility from TDA, the company. And there was one artist performing. The interesting thing is that all departments were remotely controlled. So technically, for instance, if you look at video, the cameras were beside of one camera, all the other cameras were remote heads, but they were not controlled from an OB van or B truck outside. They were controlled from Mainz, which is about 200 kilometers away from Bottrop. While the video director, Sven Offen, sat in Vienna and cut and called the show from there. If I now look at our part, I did the design, the production and lighting design for this show, and I sat in Munich, not being on site, and my trusted programmer Mark Brunkert wasn't on site either. He sat in close by Frankfurt in his home office behind the lighting console and controlled and programmed the lighting rig from Frankfurt, which was in Bottrop, another 300 kilometers or whatever it is away. So, and that was used in every department. So they were all controlled from the home offices pretty much, or from somewhere else on the planet. Or in the case of there was the whole broadcast sound was a 5.1.4 surround sound, which was mastered in real time, but it wasn't mastered on site. It was mastered in a great studio environment in New York by Ronald Prent in the Valhalla Star Studios. So ultimately, that kind of sparked my interest right away, because that is something which hasn't been done, at least not been done in that shape or form, that every department was remotely controlled. And it was something interesting, and it was a steep learning curve because it's a different workflow, not sitting on site. But we managed to do it, and out of that, and there is so many ways to use that technology in the future as well. And there are things where we already have thought of, but there will be many more things to where you can implement the technology. Possibly not completely remote control the whole production, but parts of it, or outsource things. And this is something which also I think will heavily influence and be a part of shows in the future post the pandemic. It's interesting, and it's great, and the technology behind it, I mean, this is no real rocket science, but obviously that is something that is kind of the magical ingredient to a certain degree behind it. And it's mostly not even the technology, it's mostly the expertise and the experience and the backbone which they kind of created, especially between Peter Brand and Riedel, who are basically the two masterminds behind the whole network backbone structure. And we are currently in the process of building kind of a network situation with different network partners from each discipline in our industry, so that people who are interested in remotely controlled productions, they could come to us and we could technically provide a whole remotely produced production. The hardware which is used to do something like that is something literally everybody could buy. There's nothing special. It's all the real magic happens in the network management and the network backbone, because you've got to think of, we completely remotely controlled this production by not using some dedicated expensive fiber lines where you pay whatever. If I want to have a dedicated fiber line here in my home office for a day, it will cost up to 10,000 euros easily, 10 grand, no problem. But I used my normal household ADSL connection, and on-site in Bottrop it was all connected via ADSL and a few 4G and 5G routers. So, and to make all that magic happen and make it happen in a way which is secure, is reliable, and also with minimal latency, you need the right network management. This is absolutely the magic which happens at the Riedel Operations Center at Riedel in beautiful Wuppertal in Germany. I mean, the immersive part is the iPad part, literally, very similar to the virtual audience idea, just slightly different, a little better, I think, but that's a different topic, but different. Anyway, that was the immersive part. Beside of, if you just purely look at a design, from the start design point of view, production/lighting design point of view, it was creating kind of a live shows, intimate live show setting, which works being shot by cameras from multiple angles. So that was no real difference to what we've done beforehand to create designs which were primarily designed for camera and not for the live audience. Again, like quite often in my life, we jumped straight into a pool of cold water. I mean, Riedel kind of sent out the hardware with an intercom panel and all the connection stuff which was needed. I think a few days before the show, so we connected that here, and I think on Thursday before the show on Saturday, the first time we had a connection in between. And I had here in my little home office, I had an intercom panel, so it felt like being on site and being able to talk to all the people who were involved, to the video director, to Mark, to the lighting technicians on site, and so on and so forth. And then we jumped right in. And on a Friday we had a rehearsal day, on a Saturday we did it. And there were little gremlins on the internet side which needed to be worked out because it was a learning curve for everybody. But we jumped in, and thanks God, Mark and myself knew each other, and we just returned a week before we returned from London, where he programmed Genesis for Patrick and myself. So it's one language we speak. But still it feels different that you only can judge lighting and looks through a monitor, and it's even different because normally if you do broadcast and TV work, you still sit in the studio while you create it. Possibly you will operate it not from in there, but when you create it, you sit in the studio, and it gives you a different feel and a different atmosphere. We didn't have that here, and it's not impossible without the atmosphere, but you need to adapt to it, and you need to adapt to it quickly, because as I said, on the next day we had the show, and on the third day we had another showcase show with an actor who read from a book, a spoken word event basically. As much as I hope we do more remote work, I also hope to do on-site work again and see friends and people around the world.